we will be talking about Spring Boot today.
We're going to go to start.spring.io and we're going to build a new application. I'm going to use the latest and greatest version of Spring Boot. I work on the Spring team. I was the first Spring advocate ever.
What are the resources you recommend to learn about Spring Boot?
This is arguably the single most important release of Java ever, right? Since 1.0. In fact, I would argue that in some ways it's actually as important as 1.0, right? Insofar as it breathes new life into Java. Actually, Java 22, it brings three big features that I think open up the world for people who are using Java, right?
So I just wanted to know, like, how does that work? So you can basically use any language which you want.
There are other languages that target that. The most famous of which is these days is probably Kotlin. And we've had support for Kotlin since 2016. We love Kotlin. We're big. We actually have code in Spring Framework itself, which is majority Java, but there's some of that code that's written in Kotlin.
One thing which is in common is like most of the technologies are trying to improve developer experience, and this really shows like Spring Boot has actually come so far. Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of This is Tech Talks, and this is episode 11, and we have my co-host Sonu today. Hey Sonu, how are you doing?
Hey, I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing great. And our guest for today is Josh. Hey Josh, how are you?
Hi. Hey, my friend. How are you? My friend, actually. New friend and old.
Yeah. So I met Josh a long time ago in Greece. That was, Greece, right? So
Yeah.
we ended up doing a podcast together. And then luckily we met again last year when I went to San Francisco, where he stays
That was a
for
lot of fun.
GitHub's Universe. And we accidentally met
Yeah.
again. And Josh was like very nice enough to actually invite me to his house. And we went for a city tour as well. So thanks again, Josh, for doing that. That was a
My
very
friend,
great
no
trip.
problem. It's great. I'm glad you had fun because I always have fun showing people San Francisco. It's a wonderful place.
Yeah, cool. So probably I will visit it again this year for GitHub Universe and
Yes.
can meet again. So yeah.
Please, yeah.
So
That'd be good.
yeah, and then once I met Josh, I was like I wanted to invite Josh for a longer time to our podcast, but it never happened because we closed last season very early. But this season, as soon as we started, and we of course had a very big backlog of actually guests. So we once
Yeah.
we started inviting everyone. We also invited Josh, and he was like, okay, let's do this. So we will be talking about Spring Boot today.
Nice.
And I'm very excited because I haven't written even a single line of Spring Boot since 2018. That was the last time I actually have seen some Java code. So sorry,
Oh,
Josh.
yeah.
I mean, I don't have enough idea about Spring Boot. What about you, Sonu?
Same. I used Java 1, 2, and 3, I think when it was like year 2000 or 2001. So that was the one only time I touched Java, and I don't think Spring Boot existed back then even.
No.
Okay.
So yeah,
Okay.
I'm excited to see what it can do.
Yeah,
Sure.
cool. So
It's good stuff.
so Josh, before we go ahead, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, so thanks for having me, first of all. And second of all, I work on the Spring team. And Spring is now, the large preponderance, the majority of committers are now at Broadcom, but we were at VMware. Broadcom acquired VMware. And then before that, we were at Pivotal, but then VMware acquired Pivotal. And before that, we were at VMware. Yes, you heard that right. So, and then before that, it was an independent company. So, independent company got acquired by VMware, which then spun out Pivotal, which then got acquired again by VMware, which then got acquired by Broadcom. And so, Spring is constant. I've been wearing this shirt for more than a decade, but they keep changing the company that signs my checks around me. Like Spring, like the season. On the other hand, you can count on it being there. And yeah, it's just I work in the advocacy group. I was the first Spring advocate ever, and I joined in 2010. And by that point, Spring was already a known quantity. It had already been around in some form since 2001, and as a GA released technology that people could use since 2004. So this year is actually 20 years since the first 1.0 GA release. So by the time I joined, like I said, in 2010, Spring had already come. It had already had this incredible lifetime of like changing the world, and I was thinking, well, it's going to be nice to be a part of this journey. I'm sure I wasn't expecting it to get even more astronomically awesome, at that point in the life cycle of an open source project, right? But it has just gotten better and better and bigger and more popular than ever with Spring Boot, which came out in 2014. And that was 10 years ago, actually, if you think about that. GA 1.0 Spring Boot 2014 and GA 1.0 Spring Framework 2004, right? So 20 and 10 years respectively. Yeah.
Time for open source project.
Sorry.
I mean, that's a long,
Yeah.
long time for an open source project. I said. I mean, it's 20 years is like very
Yeah.
big time.
Yeah, and especially in the world of even Angular is what? When did that come out? 2012. I mean, that's a long-lived project. That gets better and better as well, right?
Yeah,
But
Angular
yeah,
was
Yeah, Angular
yeah,
2,
when?
I think like Angular 2 Plus came out in 14 maybe?
16,
16,
2016,
yeah.
I think 16. Yeah.
16, yeah. And AngularJS came out
Yeah.
a couple of years before that, right? Like 14,
Okay,
13,
well,
14 maybe.
in the world of JavaScript, that's incredible. That's like being around a million years. That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's good stuff. Congrats. We're lucky, both of us, all of us.
Yeah.
Great. So before we start, like, of course, we will. You said like you have a demo to show as well. So first question: what is Spring Boot?
Yeah. Well, okay. By the way, is this a podcast or a YouTube video?
So this will be a YouTube video as well, and
Wow.
we'll try to
Okay.
upload it as a podcast.
Sure.
Like on other video. So in case you have like, of course, your demo, we can just add the links in the description.
Okay, so let's go ahead and add me to the screen here. And there you go. All right, so what we're going to do, go here. I'm going to go to my second favorite place on the internet. Obviously, anybody who knows me knows that I love production first and foremost, and I love Spring. So we're going to go to start.spring.io, and we're going to build a new application. I'm going to use the latest and greatest version of Spring Boot, GA, although I just noticed I'm on PTO. You might notice I'm in the tropics right now. And they just released, apparently, this new release 3.2.4, and that's going to cause some downloads. So, okay, we're going to have to give this thing a name. I'm going to call it service. We have to choose a version of Java, so Java 17, 21, or the just released 22. You can use, honestly, I think people should just use 22 or later, 21 or later, right? 21 is fine. 22 is great too. It just came out, but I'm going to stick with Java 21 because that's a huge release that a lot of people are likely to have. This is arguably the single most important release of Java ever, right? Since 1.0. In fact, I would argue that in some ways it's actually as important as 1.0, right? And insofar as it breathes new life into Java. Actually, Java 22, it brings three big features that I think open up the world for people who are using Java, right? First of all, Java 22 gives us easy foreign function interrupt. So you can actually link to and call C code, right? A very simple process now. It's very simple to do that in something like Python or Ruby or Go or Rust or whatever. But it's always been a little hemorrhoid inducing with Java, because in order to write C code and in order to link to and use C code in Java, you had to write more C code. It's the opposite of what you want when you think about reusing C code. Is creating more of it, right? You want to just reuse the stuff that's already there. But now you don't have to do any of that. Now you can look up, kind of like a reflection API. You can look up symbols and invoke those symbols and change structs and byte buffers and things like that from the Java side, right? You can manipulate program memory in Java that lives inside of a C executable, which is great, right? And we even have the concept of memory, so you can actually malloc and free and do that kind of stuff, the equivalent of that using the Java API. But that's in Java 22. That just came out, by the way, 3 days ago on the 19th of March. So brand new release. Most people will have Java 21, however. This is the one I was telling you brings the single most important thing, which is virtual threads. This virtual threads is, in a lot of ways, sort of, I think this is a nice, what's the right way to say it? All things owe a debt to other things, right? And in the same way that JavaScript owes its name to Java, Java now owes this, or at least the evolution that is this, to JavaScript, right? So it's a full circle in a way. We have now these things called virtual threads, which gives you all of the benefits of something like async await, which came from JavaScript, without having to write async await, right? It's actually a much more concise less verbose thing than what you have in JavaScript, but it does the same thing. It's very, very nice. So we'll see that in a second. And then we also have native images, right? So GraalVM native images. We'll talk about that. We're going to build a web application, and maybe I'll use OpenAI. Okay, I'm gonna not that one. I want to use the actual from OpenAI itself, not from not the one hosted on Azure. We could add, Gemini, or we could add Olama or Hugging Face. We could do AI. We could do whatever. So I got web. I got AI. Got GraalVM. What else did I forget? Did I forget anything else? I don't think I did. But you could bring GraphQL in. I don't know, something. It depends on what you're trying to do. This is a backend framework after all. And of course, you might want to talk to a SQL database. Maybe you use JDBC here. Do that. Maybe I'll use Spring Data JPA for ORM mapping, talking to my SQL database. And I also want to use Docker Compose. I want to have a Docker Compose file that will spin up a Postgres database for me, so that I don't have to worry about that later. And then maybe I also want to, I want to move quickly, so I'll set up dev tools as well. So I'm going to just go ahead and specify this project, open this up here. I'm going to go to my downloads directory, and I've got a script here called UAO service.zip. I'm going to open that up. And all that does is it unzips and opens, right? It's just a little alias in my shell that runs a Python program that unzips the zip file and opens it up in IntelliJ, or if it's you could use whatever ID you want, though. It doesn't really matter. Okay, so let's see here. Close all that down. Remember I told you it's using Spring Boot 3.2.4. So actually it's downloading a bunch of stuff right now. This wouldn't happen normally. Okay, it looks like it's happy. Let's just do let's do a little compilation here, just to force it to do everything, one more time. Shake out all the dependencies, right? Okay, here we go. It looks like it's fine. It looks like it's just downloading. Okay, yeah, it's fine. That was actually very quick. What you just saw was me running the code for the very first time on a new version of Spring Boot without having downloaded anything, right? It's failed because there is no database here. That's okay. We can fix that ourselves. So get rid of that. Go back to our code here, and let's talk about the application itself. So we've got a public static void main entry point into the application, right? It's very simple. Let's say I wanted to create a HTTP endpoint. There's a couple ways you could do this. You could create a simple, controller like this. Okay, private file, and then maybe I create an endpoint like hello, right, like that, and string hello. Use Google Duet or CodePilot or something, right? I can do that. Maybe I want JSON, right? Maybe I want a JSON endpoint, so I could return either an object or just return a map, and so I can return a map of message hello world, okay? And I want to make this a controller. So that's one way, but I think maybe a lot of your viewers, if they're using JavaScript, they might perhaps be more familiar with the sort of functional Express.js style, right? In which case you would use a router function, so service response, hello endpoints, right? And you just say return router functions dot, sorry, it's not router functions, it's route, okay, like that. And tab, there we go, good. And I want to import that, thank you. Hello. Good, okay, so that's the same thing basically. And instead of returning it here as a method, you just pass it in the body like that. So there's the, and of course this could be static, right, as well. So, and then that's a Lambda parameter, but you don't really need it to be surrounded by parentheses like that. So it depends on your style. It really doesn't matter which one you use. Either one is the same. Let me see if I can, it's getting a little in my face. Let me just turn it off for now. Okay, there we go. Okay, so there's my simple HTTP endpoint, yeah. I want to start this up. Like I said, this is going to talk to a SQL database, and it created a Docker Compose file for us here, right? And maybe I want to expose the port there, and maybe I don't want, what Spring Boot will automatically do is it'll start up that Docker Compose file for us when the application starts up. But I don't really want that. I'll just let it generate that file for me, and I'll disable that mechanism. It's good for development, but for our demo, I'll just get rid of it for now. So now I've got a very simple public static void main with an entry point. I want to talk to a SQL database. It's gonna, in the background here, I can open up the shell. I can say Docker Compose up, yeah, and that'll just run the Docker Compose file that we just created in the background. At least I hope it will, assuming Docker isn't asleep. Come on. Wonder what, oh, there it is. It was very confused. There you go. It's happy. It's up and running. And so now I want to tell Spring Boot, okay, Spring Boot, when you start up, go ahead and run a SQL file to initialize the database. So I'll add this to the application.properties. And then I'm going to go here to my code and I'll add a new file, source main. I could create some schema, right? I'm going to create a new file here called schema.sql. Say create table if not exists, customer ID serial primary key, name text not null. Very good. So now I've got a schema table. And now maybe I want some sample data. Okay, so I'll add that as well. And I can say insert into customer name and values. I can just put A, B, C, right? That kind of thing. So I've got 3 records there. All right. And now I want to model that data. So I'll say I'm going to create a record. Okay, so record customer integer ID string name. This is a Java class that has a field and called ID and another one called name. I'm going to map this to my ORM technology. So I'll use @ID to tell that this is the primary key. It's going to have getters. I'll have toString equals hash code, all that kind of stuff. And I'm going to create a data access repository, something that'll give me the ability to run queries against the database, but I don't have to write the all that code. I don't want to write all that code myself if I can avoid it. So there's that, and then maybe I'll create an endpoint here. Maybe I'll create another endpoint called hello or customers rather. And in order to get those records, like I said, I'll use this repository that I just created, and I'll just return the results like this. I'll say repository.find all. Here we are. Okay. There we are. Good. So now let's see if we can run this application. I think we got something kind of, we've got some stuff already working here. Let's go ahead and restart it. It's saying that it needs a SQL database. Oh, because I need to specify the credentials to connect to that data source, right? So Spring data source URL, JDBC, PostgreSQL, localhost, and then it's remember what the Docker Compose file says. It says my database, secret, and my user. Okay, so my database username is my user, and then the password is secret, right? And of course, you wouldn't put this in a production application. For development, this is fine, but you can use environment variables or something like that if you wanted to in your shell, or you can use a Kubernetes secret or something like that. But you do this, you'd say export these environment variables in your shell, and then that would override what's provided here in the config file. Okay, so we've got this. Let's go ahead and restart the application, this time with more gusto, okay? And localhost customers. There we go. There's our JSON data. Fine, no big deal. And what about our endpoint there? Hello, I think it was.
No, this is coming from this is coming from the JSON file or from the database?
Well, the data. This is coming from the database. I'm talking to the SQL database using an ORM, object relational mapper. That's this interface here. And I can create custom finder methods as well. I can say collection customer find customer by name, string name, and this will get automatically turned into, when I call that method, it'll turn it into a query like select all from customers where name equals that, right?
Oh, that's pretty cool.
And you have to appease the compiler there. That's pretty important. So if I wanted to do another endpoint by name like that, I could do find by customer name, and I could say the request dot param name is name, right? Is that what I'm supposed to do? Get. Yeah, so now we can restart this. Okay, and we do, where's my browser here? Localhost customers and A, I think it was that not the endpoint?
No.
Customers name, request dot param, oh, no value. Oh, I have to pass in a parameter. I did a path variable I was thinking of. So I want to do a path variable. There you go, restart. And then that. Okay, so go back to here, and there's the, well, remember it's been reinserting the data each time I run the program.
Yeah.
So maybe I delete from customer to reset. Okay, so now restart again, go over here, and there you go. There's the SQL result. Okay, great. So that's pretty straightforward, right? And of course, you want to like make this, it's 2024, so this is all pretty stock standard stuff. But these days, people are using AI as well. So maybe maybe I have an endpoint here where we ask, well, remember back on the Spring initializer, I included the Spring AI module for OpenAI, but there are other modules. Now I can talk to it via the automatically configured chat client, right? And I can call this Singularity. And, maybe we can ask it a question or something. I don't know. Let's see. So we can say Singularity dot call And I'm going to ask it, let's see, passing a multi-line string here. What do we want to do? What's the question we want to ask? When was Angular created? I don't know, something.
Yeah.
I'm sure it knows the answer, but who cares? I'm sure you all know the answer too, right? So reload that. Okay, go back to the browser, and we said AI. Okay, now it's taking its time to get that response. You saw it spun its wheels for a second, right?
Yeah, yeah.
But that's okay, because what's happening behind the scenes is this AI client that we've just injected, that Spring would automatically configure for us behind the scenes. That's making a network call to the OpenAI API endpoints, right? And that call in turn is reading input. They're reading bytes from the network socket one at a time, and eventually it gets turned into a buffer, and then that buffer gets turned into a string, and that string is what's sent back and turned into JSON. While we're waiting for that, what's happening? Well, we've got a thread. We're sitting on that thread, and we're wasting time on that thread because we're just sitting there, aren't we? We're just waiting and waiting for those bytes to come back, and nobody else in the system is able to use that thread in the meantime. This is particularly a big problem in something like JavaScript, where it's single-threaded, right? Or at least it used to be in the very beginning with Node.js. And so you really want some way to say, okay, look, I asked for that data, but I can't sit here and wait. I have other things to do. I need to render the browser DOM, or I need to do other things while this network request is happening. And so in JavaScript, you had Node.js in the very beginning, you had callbacks, right? You pass a function lambda as a callback, and then you get the response. And then eventually you got not futures, what did you call them? Promises. You got promises, so you can chain things together. And then eventually you got async await. And the way that async await works, for your audience, I'm sure you'll know, you mark the method that does the blocking IO-centric thing with async, and then you use await to signal to the compiler that you're going to invoke an async method. And this has this poisonous viral-like effect of spreading throughout your code base. Anywhere you want to do non-blocking IO now also needs to be made to do non-blocking IO. So eventually your whole code base gets painted with this new keyword, async and await, these two keywords. And it means that, frankly, why wouldn't I want that, right? I want that to be everywhere. So in Java 21, what they did was they just, like Go, kind of, they found a way to just, when you do the blocking thing, it's just not blocking anymore. It just isn't, right? And all you have to do in your Java code, if you're using low-level threads, instead of saying thread dot of platform dot whatever, like that, right? I want to create a thread. I can create a thread. Instead of doing this kind of thing, I can just say thread dot of virtual dot start. And I can pass in a runnable or something like that. And here I can do network IO just as before. And the result is this thread is now running. Anything I do that is blocking inside of this thread, it doesn't block. And so you might do a blocking thing here on one thread, and then you come back a second later and you find they're actually running on a different thread now, but you haven't done any explicit thread handouts or anything. So to demonstrate that, let me show you an example that I stole. Okay, I'm just going to admit it. I stole. I outright, utterly, and unabashedly stole from my friend Jose Pomac, who's a developer. He's a developer advocate at Oracle for the Java team. And so he has this great example. I'll create a little bean here that is going to do blocking things. Okay, so when the application starts up, I will create a bunch of threads. So I'll say before var I 0, I is less than 1,000, let's say, and I'm going to create a bunch of threads. So var threads, and by the way, this can be a lambda. It should have been a lambda. There you go, much better. Var threads, new array list, right? I'm going to keep a bunch of threads in a collection. I'm just going to add them. I'll say threads dot add thread dot of platform. This is the old style, right? And in that thread, I'm going to sleep. This is a blocking thing. This is something that sits there and wastes time on threads. So I'll sleep for 100 milliseconds. And I'm going to do that, but not before I take note of the current thread name, okay? And actually, I'm going to take names. I'm going to put this in this set. Now, sets, of course, are unique. They dedupe the elements. So if you add the number 1 to a set 5 different times, it'll only appear once when you iterate, right? So I'll say, okay, if I am on the first thread, right? Var first thread, that means that we have 1,000 threads, but I'm only on the first one. If I'm on that first one, then I'm going to take the current thread's names, and I'm going to add it to this list, okay? I know it's a little in the weeds, but basically, let's just take note of the current thread only if we're on the first one, okay? And this could be a lambda as well. There you go. So now I've done that. I've taken note of the current thread. I slept for 100 milliseconds. Let's do that again. So I'm going to copy and paste. Don't do this at home. This is the second time. third time, fourth time. Okay, so I'm just sleeping for 400 milliseconds. But in between that, if I'm on the first thread, I'm taking note of the current thread's name. Okay, and now at the end of this, I'm going to just print out the contents of that set of unique thread names. Okay, so let's go ahead and rerun the program. This is this class gets invoked. It gets automatically run when the application starts up. Oh, I didn't launch them, right? Oh, let me do that one more thing. So I've got the threads.add. I'm going to go here, for var t threads t.start, and then I'm going to wait for all of them to finish. Okay, so I'm just, by the way, you could, so it's a matter of style. You could do this too. You could say thread dot start or whatever. Okay, doesn't matter. Restart. Here we go. Okay, so the program started. You can see it was on, the first thread was on one thread, one actual operating system thread the entire time. That makes sense, right? This is the old style. But what that means is that thread, this one thread, for the 100 milliseconds I was waiting, nobody else in the system could use it. That disincentivizes scale. It obstructs my ability to scale the system because I only have a limited number of threads in my system, kind of like Node.js in the very beginning, where you only had one thread, right? I can have 1,000 threads, but I can't really, with this model, I can't have like 1,000,000 threads, right? With Go, I can have 1,000,000 Go routines, for example. So the only thing you have to do now to change that is to change this equation right there, which is of virtual. And now you run the program, you can see one thread, two threads, three threads, four threads, right? So it actually moved the actual real thread of execution from one operating system thread to another, all completely transparent to me. And what that means is that that thread is now free in the meantime for somebody else in the system to use it. So now I can have millions or tens of millions of threads for basically free. It doesn't cost me anything. So that's a lot of demo code. Obviously, it's not pretty, you're not going to do that kind of thing. For Spring Boot developers, however, if you want threads to be non-blocking for all your I/O, your database, your web, you just do this. There you go. So you won't even write any of that code I just showed you, but now you understand what's happening. So now I've got a non-blocking I/O program that's talking to the cloud. I've got data. I've got a really simple web app, and you can see how that's working. You can see I'm restarting it. It's really quick to restart. I didn't even take the shortcut of using the dev tools. Earlier on, you saw me using this dev tools right here. This would make it so that it restart takes like less than 300 milliseconds or something like that, right? It's like live reload. But what I want to do is I want to make this production worthy. So I'm going to compile this using GraalVM. Now, I don't know if you know about GraalVM, my friends, but GraalVM is open JDK Java distribution that has some extra niceties, okay? And so I'm going to run that here. I'm going to say, create a native image for me. This will take a long time. Actually, it takes like 30 or 40 seconds. It's very, very slow, kind of like C compilation or C++ or Rust or something. The larger the code base, the more time it takes. But the resulting binary is going to be super small, and it doesn't need a JRE anymore. It doesn't need the Java runtime. It's a statically linked, self-contained program, right? So it's like a Go program. It's operating system specific too. It's for Mac or for Linux or for Windows or whatever, but not cross-platform anymore. It's not a write once, run anywhere compatible binary, but it doesn't need the runtime, and it's lightning fast, and it's self-contained. It's like a C program, okay? So I'm letting that do its work behind the scenes, and this does take a long time, and I'll tell you what, it's my least favorite part of the process is that it just takes a long time. And eventually, I get bored. I get bored just sitting there waiting for the thing to happen, and I start to hum music, and I start to think, gosh, wouldn't it be great if I could? I don't know. I get bored. I stare at the wall. I hear music, and I start to hear elevator music. And eventually, I decided, wouldn't it be great if everybody else could hear elevator music? So I went to Oracle and I said, hey, Oracle, please play elevator music during the native compilation. And I got some great responses. I said, I already hear elevator music in my head when I do these long compilations. I'd just like everybody else to hear it too. Thank you for your amazing work. And I got some great responses, including this, which links to some elevator music from the video game for Super Nintendo. From Nintendo 64 for GoldenEye, the video game based on the movie from the 90s, the James Bond movie. And then I got somebody said we can have beeps. That's a good idea. I like that. And then I got another great response here from one of my friends at Oracle on the GraalVM team. He's a researcher. His name is Fabio Nipaus, Dr. Fabio Nipaus, and he says, thanks for the feature request, Josh. The problem is that you just be fixing the symptoms and not the cause. And they're trying to fix the cause. But he did say, I have prototyped a -- Josh Long mode for the native image compiler. So behind the scenes, that thing I'm doing is native compile, native image, and you'd hear music, and then you'd see music brought to you by Josh Long. And then, of course, you need something to look at, so that would show up there as well. I'm sure that'll get merged any day now. Okay, So this
That's
finished
amazing.
after 49 seconds. Now we go to the native compile service, run that program again. Okay, so there's the application, right? It started in, actually that was very slow. For some reason on the Mac, the very first run is slow, but most successive run, on Linux it's just always fast, and Windows is always fast. On Mac, the very first run, for some reason, I think it's like process mapping or something. So that's more typical, 100 milliseconds or 1/10 of a second to spin up a program that has the AI, the ORM database framework, the embedded web server, has unlimited virtual threads. I can create, a million threads, no problem. And most importantly, there's no JRE, so I can just deploy that. And that's the RAM. You measure this in kilobytes. So divide this by 1,000. So it's actually about 119 megabytes of RAM for the entire thing. That's including the runtime, the web server, the database, the AI, all that other stuff. And now I think we're ready to go to production. This is what I mean when I say there's never been a better time to be a Java and Spring Boot developer. It's amazing what you can do now for basically no code. This code here, this is a demo. I'm just for our edification. Okay, it's not real. You're not going to sit there and do low-level threaded code like that. So
Yeah.
really, if you look at this is 52 lines of code. That's 5 lines right there, and then there's this from line 42 to 28. So that's 14. So call it 19 lines, right? I mean, the whole program is 19 lines of code. It's got the same scale or better as Go or Node.js, while being faster than both of those in a lot of cases, and scalable like them, and very concise. You can see it's multi-line strings, var, lambdas, all this kind of stuff that people haven't seen, or maybe they don't really understand that Java has these things and has had them for a long time. So it's just an amazing choice. And obviously, if you're an Angular developer, then you're probably gonna know about dependency injection and so on. Well, you saw that in use here, right? I'm using dependency
Yeah.
injection to check these things by their type. So I think it's a very natural fit for somebody using Angular as well.
Cool. That's great. I mean, Josh, I mean, I think the demo covered most of the questions which we had, like why should we learn Spring Boot and how to get started. The only thing which I can see is it has become much easier. I mean, I remember writing Spring Boot in 2019 and it was pain. I mean, of course, like it used to take a lot of time to compile, and yeah, we used to have finish our lunch meanwhile. And I think Sonu has to leave. So Sonu, see you probably in the next episode.
Yeah, sounds good.
Uh,
Nice meeting
yeah.
you, Josh. Yeah.
Nice to meet you, buddy.
So
So yeah,
thanks again to show this. I mean, I have few questions. I mean, probably it will be my last
please.
one. So
Take as
Spring Boot,
much time.
when you started that page, like start.spring.io, there were options like you
Yes,
can
sir.
use Java, you can use other languages as well. For
Yeah.
example, there was Kotlin.
Yeah.
So yeah, so I just wanted to know like how does that work? So you can basically use any language which you want. I mean, the supported platform
Yeah.
especially.
Well, yeah. So Java, the JVM is a runtime, kind of like the .NET CLR or WebAssembly or something. It's a low-level code, and there are other languages that target that. The most famous of which is these days is probably Kotlin. And we've had support for Kotlin since 2016. We love Kotlin. We're big. We actually have code in Spring Framework itself, which is majority Java, but there's some of that code that's written in Kotlin. And we support the Kotlin community. Even before we actually had Kotlin code, we supported people using our Java APIs from Kotlin, because of course you can reuse anything in Java from Kotlin. There's also there's Groovy support. We support that as well. Nice language. And there's other languages that we don't explicitly mention there, but that you can use. For example, Scala is very common as well, right? Kotlin's great. Kotlin's a really nice language, and we have a great relationship with the Kotlin team at JetBrains. And yeah, feel free to use the language you like.
Okay. So which one you recommend to learn in 2024?
Well, there are far more jobs in Java. Obviously, it's the second or third, or depends on what you're looking at, I guess. But on any given list, it's probably in the top 3 most famous, widely used languages out there by a country mile. So that if you're looking for stability, learn Java. If you're already coming from the Android ecosystem where they have gone Kotlin first, then yeah, you're already set. You already know Kotlin. Just start using Spring. And we don't. And by the way, Kotlin, even though it's number 2, it's not like it's a huge community. Like I said, there's millions of
Yeah.
apps that are in Kotlin now on Android, so you can use that as well. I'm a Kotlin Google developer expert. That's I think one of the things we have in common. We're both GDEs, and so I'm a big fan. Please, yeah, either way. And the language will
And
meet you where you are, of course. It has nice integrations.
yeah, uh, like what are the resources you recommend to learn about Spring Boot?
Oh, well, so spring.io / guides are little introductions to all sorts of stuff in the world of Spring, or spring.academy are free trainings from people on the Spring team and so on that are designed to get you up to date. It's like a full course. It's actually, there's even a path to certification there. You don't have to get the certification. It's very cheap if you do, but you can just get this. You can just watch the videos for free. They're all there. The coursework is all there. The lessons. It's all free. So that's a great resource as well. And of course, if you're still not sated and you still want more, you might check out my humble YouTube channel, or better yet, check out the Spring YouTube channel, Spring Source Dev at Spring Source Dev. Um, or you can check out mine, which is Coffee Software on YouTube.
Okay. So so all these links are actually available in the video description. You can actually refer it there. So thanks again, Josh. I mean, this was fun. I mean, that demo was really nice. I mean, I really loved like how much you can do in so much less number of cores, because I think one thing which is in common is like most of the technologies are trying to improve developer experience, and this truly shows like uh, Spring Boot has actually come so far. I mean, 5 years before and now, I mean, it's totally different. That's great.
Yeah,
And what other thing which I liked was Gradle has become fast. I remember like I remember using Maven, and it was like,
yeah,
oh my god, does I used to wonder if this thing will compile or not. Like it was a pain. So we has to always delete this like the build folder and then rerun it again because it used to
right.
cause a lot of issues. And good to see like Gretel is a good choice, and now it is so fast as well.
Yeah,
Uh,
it's wonderful. It's a great time to be a Java Spring developer for sure. And you can use
so
Maven, by the way. It's still there. It's on the start to Spring.io. It's just not the default anymore.
yeah, I mean, hope no one does. No, no, I mean, no hate about Maven, but I have used it and I have very bad experience using Maven, so that's why.
Oh no,
So
no good. Sorry. Well,
cool. So I
good
think
to see you, my friend.
that's it, Josh. Thanks again for joining. One last question: do you want to
Yes,
promote anything on the channel as a guest?
I think I just did. Go Spring. Use Spring. And I don't know. I check out Santosh's website and YouTube. It's great too. I'm a big fan.
Oh, thank you so much. So yeah, that's it for the day, Josh. I mean, thanks again for joining us, and it was a great discussion and great to know about Spring Boot in 2024. And
Ah,
hopefully,
so
we can do a longer like live stream where we go together. That would be fun to
yes,
do, like
I would love
Angular
for you to
front
teach me
end
some
and
of the. I
yeah,
want you to teach me about the Angular Wix merger. Like that would be really cool. I don't know. I know that's really cool. I just don't understand the details, and this is why I come to
yeah,
you. My expert
yeah.
on all things JavaScript.
Yeah, I mean that will take time probably because it's early, very early. Even there is no RFC so far, so I think
Right.
it will take a few months till they come up with RFC. But yeah, once that's out, I mean
Right.
that will be a great discussion to have. And thanks
That'd
again.
be cool.
Thanks again for listening and watching this episode. And we'll be back again with another episode next week. So see you soon, and thank you. Bye bye.